too often women are buying this messaging that, whether they realize it or not, that men should be controllable in some way, right? So it's like, if he doesn't agree with you or he's going against you, he's disrespecting you.
Hey there, family. Welcome to another edition of Family on Trial. My name is Daryl Jones, and I am here with my friend Morgan Dakers. She is a wife, a mother, entrepreneur, and artist. In fact, if you're looking at the screen, if you happen to be watching on YouTube or any other video platform, you will see her artwork. You will see the Family on Trial artwork on the screen. She is the author. She is the originator of this artwork, and she did a very fabulous job, and I really appreciate everything that she's done in that respect. So, Morgan.
Yeah.
How you doing?
I'm so good. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So, here's a topic that's probably going to end up being more than one video, because nowadays I'm on social media way more than I ever intended to be.
You and me both, brother.
Yeah, and but you know, it's something that has to be done, and so we'll do it. And but what I'm finding a lot, because I deal with a lot of family type postings, and so I see a lot of stuff. Particularly from females, from the women, a lot of memes about how horrible men are, and men are no good, and fathers are horrible, and single motherhood is like the greatest, and you don't have to deal with the child and another child in the form of an adult male, and just on and on. I see, like, really, I probably see about 20 to 30 of these memes before I stop scrolling. On the daily basis, and I keep finding myself, I was like, well, I asked myself the question, well, who are these women picking? Because I know other guys, other men, their fathers, their husbands, they love their families, they love their children, and I'm like, well, how are we missing the mark? So then the question becomes, and Morgan, I wanted to bring the female perspective in, because I have my viewpoint, but what is it? Why is it so difficult for a woman to find a man?
So that's a really loaded question. And for me, I was thinking about this a lot all week, because you're right. You could go really anywhere through our society and our culture right now, and there's a lot of demeaning men in the, I would say, like, they would say that the mission is to promote women positivity, but in that we've been demeaning masculinity for some time. But I like to look at, like, where it came from. And, like, for me, because I'm a Christian woman, so I realize that there may be some people hopping on here who are concerned with how the family is shaping up today, and maybe they're not Christians. Maybe they're coming from a different background, or they're just searching for some kind of truth. So I would say, for all of the viewers who may be seeing this later, and maybe you haven't decided, hey, Jesus is my Lord, just know that this is where I'm coming from. So I'm coming from this perspective, right? So for me, I always look at the Bible at biblical truth, and I look at that as truth, and then I look at everything else and I say, how is this not lining up, and where have we kind of gone out of control? So
the Bible is the standard.
Yes.
And then
the Bible's the standard.
And then everything else measures against what?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, yes, exactly right. Now, I think this may, and I hope that all of the women watching this also will stay tuned till the end, because I don't want them to be like, hey, this is really offensive, or it might bring up some negative feelings in me, and decide to just switch off, because I think that if you stay tuned, you'll see that this is very edifying for women as well. But everything starts, to me, at marriage, or at least, like, everything starts with how God created this relationship to look like. So if you go all the way back to Genesis, so I looked at Genesis, if you look at Genesis 3:16, God's talking to the woman, and it was right after the fall. So this is after she's been created and he's been created. So you have these two people that have been created. They've been created to partner together. All right. And then after the fall, God says to the woman, he says, let me see. Let me just tell you the whole thing. He starts off by saying, I will greatly increase your labor pains. We all know about that. Can I get an amen, ladies? The pain you will give with children. And then it says, you will want to control your husband, but he will dominate you. People forget about that all the time. You will want to that's a promise from the Lord. You will want to control your husband. And so I think I've felt it very many times. It's like when I have a very healthy relationship, I think of it as a healthy marriage with my husband, but there's many a time when I'm like, I think things should be this way. And we disagree, and I feel that springing up in me. And I think that a lot of other women, if they were honest with themselves, feel that as well. But, what I would say is the world. So then you move on through the Bible, and we get to these verses that have been very controversial for so many people who are opponents to the Bible, many of them feminists. So they say, what do you mean wives should submit to your husbands? So in Ephesians 5:22, wives submit to your husbands as to the Lord.
Oh, that's a deep one.
It's a deep one to unpack. Colossians 3:18, wives submit to your husbands as is fitting to the Lord. And there is more in that verse, and we'll get there.
Yeah.
Because it talks way more about what husbands need to do for wives than it does for what wives need to do for husbands.
Oh my! I'm so glad you said that.
It talks so much about that.
A lot of women do get caught up on I'm supposed to just obey or submit, and I'm nobody's slave, and that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says it has nothing to do with you becoming a slave. But that is a huge one to unpack. And I appreciate you making the point about the Bible says a lot more to men about being husbands and being men in general than it speaks of the woman's need to, what she needs to do to be, a wife and a mother. But we get hung up on those few words. And when biblically speaking, when it really comes down to it, when you unpack wives are to submit to their husbands, but their husband, it goes on to say the husbands are to love their wife as Christ loved the church, and when you unpack that, you say, I'm like, man, I think the men got
a tall order.
Oh, it's ridiculously a tall order. But then that goes back to lining up biblically as opposed to the world.
I just want to talk about that word submit really quickly. So if you look at it, sub is to be under. Mission, so to be under the same mission. So really, and we can unpack this further, but really what it's saying is, wives, be under the mission of your husband. Be on this team. Your husband, you're both on this mission and you're under the same mission.
Yes.
So it has nothing to do with what the world is, what I would call it, or society, you might call it, or the entertainment industry. All of these people would like to paint it as. That has nothing. And so for me, I feel like the main issue and all of these sub issues that come out of it that have caused demasculation in men comes from basically, well, let's see, how do I want to put this? It comes from a lie about what that means, about what submitting means, about what, first of all, being a wife and a partner means.
Right.
Because
the first thing that comes up in people's mind is that I'm not your slave. I'm not going to be your little obedient little wife. Yeah. And you hear that all the time. You're like, I'm supposed to just be your obedient little wife. No, and actually, when you boil it down to its essence, it's to, you don't even have to always agree. You just not be quarrelsome about it, not cause dissension within the family about it. Because if you have said, I have found a man, then you know what his mission is, and you know that you should you should go along with that. If you're with someone whose mission you don't agree with,
Yeah.
you're not with a man.
And that's not to say that your opinion is discredited.
Correct.
In fact, like when you go on through Ephesians as to how a husband should treat a wife, it's with the utmost respect and care for what she has to say. That's not to say you're always going to be on the same page all the time, but there have definitely been times when I have to realize, all right, we're not getting anywhere right now. If we have two people who are leaders of this family, and this leader is saying, let's go this way, and this leader is saying, let's go this way, there has to be one of them at some point that says, you know what, I don't necessarily agree, but let's do it your way, for the peace of that family and for the peace of that union. And so what God is saying is, like, wives, do that for your husbands. And it will not always be easy, but do it. And in fact, he tells us we're going to want to control them. So there's this, and I think what the enemy does, what I would think of as my enemy in the world does, is this message of, hey, ladies, that feeling of wanting to control your husbands, that's natural and normal and right. And that's what you see in entertainment and all of this is women controlling their husbands, and then in very subtle and sometimes not so subtle ways, the messaging is, that's right, the guy is the dummy, the woman is the real head of the household.
Yeah, you see that all over the place.
In my big fat Greek wedding, the man may be the head of the household, but the woman is the neck, and she can turn him however she wants. These messaging coming through, and everyone laughs about it, and everyone thinks it's funny, and the dad is the butt of the jokes.
Right, and then comedy makes it okay.
And
then it seeps into the family, and even to the point of where it's not even, you don't even need a husband anymore. Mm-hmm. You know, you have your baby daddy, you can have a sperm donor, literally a sperm donor, go down to the sperm bank, and because single motherhood is just celebrated all over the place. Whereas fathers are constantly appearing as doofuses. I just watched a Christmas commercial from Amazon, and Santa, and I'm not a fan of Santa, and that's another topic for another day. But but he was this bumbling fool, and Mrs. Claus had to come save the day. And I'm like, well, I mean, my goodness, that's not the Santa I grew up with. Right. Every chance that can be taken to make men look like idiots is taken. And so and that is definitely comes through in the entertainment industry, comes through in our governmental policies. Section 8, you can't have a man in the house.
Right.
You don't get rent relief. You don't your social
punished.
Your socioeconomic status is not relevant if there's a man in the house. Well, how is that? Because if you're both struggling and you need help and you say you care, but it's not caring. It's constantly promoting not having that masculine energy in the house. Yeah. What standards do you see being applied by women when they're selecting their counterparts, their mates, their quote unquote men today? What is their standard? What does that look like?
So too often, and again, it comes back to the same issue. So too often women are buying this messaging that, whether they realize it or not, that men should be controllable in some way, right? So it's like, if he doesn't agree with you or he's going against you, he's disrespecting you.
Sassy. I just learned that from my daughter. She's 18,
sassy.
And she's talking to this guy, and she called him sassy, and I'm like, what does that mean? Because I know what it meant when I was growing up,
right?
And so I looked it up, and because she tried to give me her 18-year-old version, and it was not it's not that she was inarticulate, but I just wanted to verify what she was saying. It was like, oh well, he talks back. And I was like, oh, so he has his own opinion? Because the last time I checked, talking back applied to what a child does to a parent. So now women have been, in my opinion, from what I've seen, women have been programmed over the past 3-4 generations that they are the keepers and guardian of the children and the men.
Yes.
You say, oh, I have, I've seen people literally do this. They have 2 kids and their husband. They say, well, I have 3 kids. And I was like, well, I only see 2. And it's like, oh, you got to include him. And I'm like, well, if he's a child, then what does that make either makes you his parent, which
It's weird.
Weird and disgusting. Okay.
Just say it as it is. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. Or you have no idea how to pick a man.
Mm-hmm.
But no one gets to that point. So I'm sorry, but you was in the middle.
I think what it is that so many of these women, because we've been taught, even within church world, like there are women who are Christian, professing Christians who go to church, and they still like to skate over those submit to your husbands, and they'll, verses. And because they're like, well, that was back then and this is now, and we don't like to look at that. But what I would challenge them to do is to take a real study on what that means and what marriage between two people looks like. And I would say that what it really is and what God intended it to look like is very different than what the world would have you believe. And so I think in response to that lie that the world is having people believe, the feminist movement latched onto it, that lie, and said, okay, well, we've been kept down for so long. And so now there's this unhealthy like twisting of it where, rights for women is one thing. I'm all for rights for women.
Of course, yeah. You should be able to vote. You should be able to own property. You should be able to move about as you see fit. You're a child of God. And
yes, indeed. And in the Bible, people don't realize like the Bible was such a radically, like in those times, the fact that the women were the first people to find the empty tomb, and God did that on purpose.
Yeah.
That like God shows equality for women so throughout His Word. Okay, so it's. That's a whole nother thing. But we should never celebrate one gender at the expense of the other.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's what's been happening is we've gone all the way on this other end. And that's what's been happening. And unfortunately, what we're looking at is a loss of the warrior's heart in a man. I believe that women start looking for the low-hanging fruit. So what that means is, what have they been taught to look for in a man? They've been taught that if a man agrees with you, puts you on a pedestal, treats you so nicely, takes you out, all these things. Now, I'm not saying that all of that isn't that all of that isn't great, that some of that isn't great.
Right.
But they've been taught, chivalry, that if the guy is like just fawns over you, you're up here on this pedestal and everything, that's what they should look for. But that also means that if they disagree with this man and the man disagrees with them, that the man should be a doormat because you want to make this woman happy, right? They've been taught that that's what it should look like. Otherwise, if this man stands up and says, absolutely not, that's not what we're doing, then you're disrespecting me.
Yeah, you're sassy.
It's disrespectful.
Yeah,
you're sassy.
You're being
right?
sassy.
And then they wonder, after searching for these men that they can steamroll, why they're not happy. And the reason that they're not happy is because they don't, in their very heart of hearts, want a man that they can steamroll.
Absolutely.
No woman wants a man that they can steamroll because you have to be able to respect them. And you can't respect them if you're running the show all the time.
At the end of the day, and there's a lot of women that will not want to admit this.
No, and it's hard to admit.
But in addition to what you just said, it's about feeling protected. Because they feel like they can protect themselves. And so admitting that I like feeling protected as a woman by a man, to them it means they've admitted defeat.
Because they've been told that they can't trust that man to protect them. They've been told that you have to do it on your own because don't put all your eggs in one basket. You have to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, have your own job, and take care of the kids at home, and because you can't trust.
And they write memes on Facebook to complain about how I'm doing it all because mothers are the only ones who really care. And I'm like, that is, but okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that's my soapbox.
Yes, no, I understand. I get it, but it's like, if exactly to your point, and that could mean like being protected, like, okay, maybe the man is like the sole breadwinner, but you're home like raising your children. That is one example of, sometimes that woman will start to feel like, well, I have no control here because he's making all of the money. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like, but they've been taught that it's a lie, within a healthy marriage, at least that's a lie.
Right. Well, yeah. And that goes back to the ability to pick a man as opposed to a boy. To keep picking boys and confusing them with men and then complaining about them. And then the men are sitting back going, you rejected me when I came alongside you.
Because it was difficult, because I challenged you. You rejected me because I challenged you.
Yeah, yes. Challenge in the sense of I went against your worldview.
Yes. And I'm not saying that there should be constant friction in these relationships, but I am saying that occasionally, as always happens in this life, you will come across things that are challenging. And maybe this guy isn't willing to be steamrolled. And maybe it's not going to feel real good for the woman in this scenario because she wants it this way or whatever. But at the end of the day, after all is said and done, she will gain more respect for this man for sticking to his guns if it's something that's important than for saying, well, okay, whatever you want.
Yeah.
Okay, so the things that I noticed about my man, and I was like, this is a man, not a boy. He said what he was going to do and did it. That's what a leader does. He took responsibility. Again, that's a leadership thing. And by that, I mean, and this is in early days, so I'm not talking about all of the things that I've seen since we've been married, but he would apologize first in many instances. You're not sulking and waiting for the woman to apologize because it's on them. No, he would take responsibility for his part and oftentimes convict me by coming to me first. And I'd be like, man, I should have come to him first and I should apologize for my part first. But he took the leadership and did it first. Again, leadership, striving to see my side of things in arguments and owning up to his mistakes. Again, that's servant leadership. Every single thing that was so attractive to me is a leadership quality. And I believe that those would be qualities that would be attractive to any woman. Why? Because God put those desires in a woman's heart, because a woman was created for a man and a man for a woman. And so those are things that every woman, I think, across the board would be like, yeah, that sounds like a real man, you know?
Right.
And then last but not least for me personally, because I am a grateful follower of Jesus Christ. My husband, when I first started dating him, well, when we were first just getting to know each other, he was searching for truth, I would say. And at the time, I was like, all right, Jesus, I feel like this is the guy, but if he doesn't know you, he's not the guy, because I knew that I would have to be under his mission, submission. And that means his mission needs to be submission to Jesus.
Right.
And so at a certain point while we were dating, he was saved. He gave his life over to Jesus, and then I felt comfortable saying, yeah, this is the guy.
Dear family, your support would be much appreciated. So if you would think it not robbery, could you head over to PayPal or Venmo and show us some love? Just type @FamilyOnTrial and you'll come right to our account. Send us a blessing if you would. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.